So here it is, guys, what you've been waiting for, today's message. It's all in, week 2, taken by our very own senior leader, Mark Pomeroy.
I came to be a part of Elevate Church 11 years ago. Makes me feel a little bit old. But yeah, I think I grew up with religion. I went to a Catholic school, but my perception of religion wasn't very good. But I did have some questions, I think, always lingering in the back of my mind, and I felt prompted to try and unpack what they were. But I needed a community, a space where I could do that comfortably. So I started shopping around, to be honest. Elevate was one of 3 churches, and I kept feeling prompted to come back. I've remained at Elevate Church for 11 years, probably just because they're normal people. Just my ideas of Christian people or people of a faith background were, I probably had a lot of misconceptions, to be honest, and it was to look a certain way, to act a certain way, speak a certain way. I was not that person. So Elevate was great for me to be able to walk into as I was, as a 19-year-old, and discover what faith looks like in an authentic way with real people. Also, I believe that wholeheartedly that it's a safe space for me to be able to bring my mates or just people that I encounter who have questions as well. And I can feel confident to bring them to Elevate, that there's going to be a community of people that will embrace them non-judgmentally. They can get there, they can begin to get their answers walked through in a supportive way. I think the growth that comes out of that as well, for me personally, on a week-to-week or year-to-year, it may not be so obvious at the time, but looking back over the 11 years, Elevate has been vital for my growth as a man, as a believer in God, and just as an overall person. I'm still serving at Elevate. I believe for the whole 11 years was because my upbringing, my background as a youth was pretty problematic. I was a bit of a problem child, but I got shaken up a little bit around 19 and really challenged by God to see myself as someone more than how I saw myself, which really was not coming from a good place, not a healthy place. And he challenged me a lot on that, and I got pretty fired up, to be honest, when it came to young people. And for me to get to 19 and to realise the way that God sees me looks very different from the broken image I had of myself, I didn't want to just keep that for me. That was always something I felt really strongly about, giving to other people, giving to young people, helping other young people to feel the sense of hope and belonging when the world may make that a bit murky for them, just like it did for me. So serving in youth was a pretty obvious one. I'm still just as passionate about showing kids that they have immeasurable value and worth as I was 11 years ago. And honestly, that's why I get fired up each week. I'm excited about the next chapter for Elevate, to just continue being a community, a collective of people that do life together. And life, especially someone operating from a faith perspective or any perspective, it's not linear. There are a lot of ups and downs, relationships, work, fears, doubts, everything that comes along with living. It can get the better of us, and I think it's powerful having a community of people that can help reorientate your perspective in those moments where you can't see a way forward. And I know Elevate's been really valuable for me in that regard. So yeah, more of that, more transformed people, transforming people. And just doing life together, honestly and authentically.
Well, hey there, Elevate friends and family. Great to have you with us for the second week of a series we've simply called All In, which really is both the essence of Elevate Church and very much the essence of what it means to follow Jesus. You know, people didn't sort of half follow Jesus. They either went all in or not at all. And 2,000 years later, the call from Jesus to come follow me is very much about going and staying and continuing to go all in. So last week, Steve Hall launched this series with a message called I'm Invited, which unpacked the idea that as the church, as the body of Christ, we are charged with the responsibility and the opportunity of being people and being a community and being a place where people can come in and actually come in just as they are. They don't have to have everything all together. They don't have to have all their lives fixed up before they walk through the doors. But instead that when they enter into community, when they enter into Elevate Church spaces, they're going to not be judged. And in fact, quite the opposite, they're going to be encouraged to just open their hearts and lives to Jesus, allow him to meet them right where they are. And then, he's going to lead them, but lead them into better places. So look, I strongly encourage you to go back and watch that on this channel, or jump onto any of the major podcast platforms, search Elevate Church Perth, and you'll find that message there. And that'll really set you up to be a part of this series and catch you up. Now, today I want to actually, and I've called today's message, I'm Influential. Now, this word influential or influencer is a word that gets thrown around these days, I think more than any time ever in human history. And so I wonder, what do you think of when you hear the word influencer? Well, head to the Urban Dictionary, which I don't suggest you head there for everything, but head to the Urban Dictionary, type in influencer, and this is what you're going to find. The definition: a word Instagram users use to describe themselves to make them feel famous, and more important, when no one really knows who they are or cares. Usually the type of people who call themselves foodies and post pictures of their avocado and toast because they can't really do anything else interesting. Usually also post their last holiday asking someone to hashtag take me back. And when I read that, I thought about the author of that particular definition. Who hurt you, bro? But they certainly get it right when we think about influencer today. We tie that to social media. We tie that to Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. We tie that to views and to likes and to shares. And I'm not here to dunk on that type of influencer today. In fact, because of those types of platforms, there is opportunity, unprecedented opportunity, to influence people, influence a broader sphere of people for good. And now I'm not naive to think that that's what every influencer is doing. I think actually too many influencers are committed to making a noise and not making a difference. But look, That's not what I'm here for. But I'll come back to the opportunities. Let me go a little bit more old school and look at the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of influencer. And there you'll find it stated this way: a person who inspires or guides the actions of others. Inspires or guides the actions of others. And by this definition, influencers include parents, teachers, coaches. In Elevate, it's Elevate group leaders, Elevate team members, it's community volunteers, it's the person who consistently sends encouraging text messages to people, not asking for anything in return. It's the colleague who goes a little bit out of their way to speak life into other colleagues. It's the boss who's committed not just to have people being productive in the workplace, but actually to build them up in terms of who they are and who they see themselves and their confidence and their character. That group of people are influencers. Now, I want to take it one step further, and I want to insert a definition that I would put to us is the most important definition of an influencer for those of us who are already Jesus followers. And it's this: an influencer who is a Jesus follower is a person who is reaching people and building people for Jesus. And by this definition, you can be an influencer. Jesus called us actually to be influencers. In fact, if you open up, you can jump into Matthew chapter 5, your Bible app. You'll find this is the beginning of Jesus teaching. This is Matthew recording, one of Jesus' biographers recording Jesus teaching the Sermon on the Mount, probably his best known sermon or message. And he's just finished talking about what's become known as the Beatitudes. You're blessed when, or other translations says blessed are. And then the very next thing he jumps into is this. He said, let me tell you why you are here. And I say this every time. You get my attention, Jesus, right here. You're here to be salt seasoning that brings out the God flavors of the earth. So he's using the metaphor of salt, that we are called to enhance our spheres. And then he says, here's another way to put it. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors of the world. God's not a secret to be kept. And Jesus knew something that we all know, and that's that light changes everything. And I'm reminded of this practically every day. I'm an early riser. I like to get up before the sun is up. And typically that means I'm also up before my wife gets up. She's still relatively early riser, but not as early as me. And so when I'm getting up, it's dark. And so the obvious thing for me to do is to turn on some lights so I don't trip over anything. That's the obvious thing. But the wise thing for me to do is to not turn on any lights and instead use the Force to navigate my way out of our bedroom. Because light changes everything, including the potential to change our happily married status if I was to turn the lights on. But light and salt influence everything. And as Jesus followers, look, go and build thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of followers on social media, great. I mean, go for it if that's what you feel God called you to do, but there's got to be a why behind that. And the why is about investing, reaching, building into people for Jesus. But you don't have to have thousands of followers on social media to be an influencer. You simply need to prioritize investing into the people God has placed in your sphere. So as we kind of journey into this notion of what it means to be all in as a Jesus follower, here's a question. Are you intentionally focusing the influence you currently have on what matters most, which by our definition is the people in your sphere, for Jesus, leading them to, pointing them to, encouraging them to get closer to following Jesus? Now, I want to show you one of the greatest influences that's recorded in Jesus' lifetime, according to our definition of what it means to be an influencer for Jesus. So if you've got your smartphone camera, pop that open and scan this flow code. It's going to take you to John chapter 4. So John's another one of Jesus' biographers. In fact, John was one of Jesus' handpicked 12 followers, so he very much had a front row seat to Jesus' life and ministry. And John records Jesus along with his 12 chosen, handpicked disciples as embarking on a journey from Judea to Galilee, which, as the crow flies, the straightest route was to go through a region called Samaria, which it makes sense to take the shortest route when you're on foot and it's hot and it's dusty. But there was a problem. And the problem was that the Jewish people, and Jesus and his 12 followers were Jewish, they hated the Samaritans, the people from Samaria. And it was a centuries-old hatred. And now I don't have time to unpack the etymology of that hatred, but at this point in history, let me just double-click on the fact that Jewish people didn't even consider Samaritans to be human. So there was the level of hatred, the level that they despised the Samaritans. And so Jewish people would go the long way around on this journey that Jesus was taking from Judea to Samaria, but not Jesus. Now, Jesus broke with convention and he went straight through Samaria. Well, while he was in that region of Samaria, John records Jesus, worn out by the trip, sat down at the well, and it was noon. Now, by the way, his 12 disciples went off to a nearby village to get lunch, but it was noon. A woman, a Samaritan, came to draw water from the well that Jesus was at. Now, John intentionally records the fact that this was noon, not to highlight that that's why they went to get lunch, but actually it's important to know that it was noon when this woman entered the scene, when she entered recorded history. See, that region of the world was a hot, and is a hot region, like Perth in peak summertime, hot. And you didn't go to the well at noon. That was not the smart play. The smart play was to get up early and go and draw water. So A, it was then the cooler part of the day. But secondly, that the women that did that, they would also use that as a little bit of a gathering time, a little bit of a socializing time to kick the day off. But not this particular woman. No, she came to the well at noon instead. Stay tuned and I'll tell you why, or John will tell us why shortly. Jesus said to her, would you give me a drink of water? Which is, he's worn out, he's thirsty. She's there with a bucket to draw water. Give me a drink of water. Obvious question, simple question. But then he said, actually, if you knew the generosity of God and who I am, you'd actually be asking me for a drink. And I would give you fresh, living water, which sounds great. She's a little spicy. And she said back to Jesus, sir, you don't even have a bucket to draw with. And this well is deep, so how are you going to get this living water? And Jesus says, everyone who drinks this water will get thirsty again and again. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Well, the woman who's had to come to the well every day at noon said, sir, give me this water so I won't ever get thirsty. I mean, this sounds like the good stuff. And then John records why this woman was coming to the well at noon. Jesus said, go and call your husband and then come back. Well, I have no husband, she said. Oh. Jesus replied, yeah, that's nicely put, I have no husband. Look, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now isn't even your husband. 5 failed marriages, and now living with someone she's not married to, that would actually probably even be shocking today. But in that culture, that was peak scandalous. I mean, several decades ago, the actress Liz Taylor, she had burnt through 7 husbands. In fact, baked into her wedding vows, it's rumored that she had the phrase, don't worry, I won't keep you long. But back then, 5 failed marriages and now living with someone you're not married to would have positioned her as a complete social outcast. See, she didn't go to the well in the morning when all the other women were there because she wasn't welcome. She would have got the looks, the stares, maybe the call-outs. And so she avoided them. She avoided other people because of her backstory. And then John records him and the 11 other disciples came back from the nearby village, having gotten lunch, and they were surprised, like anyone would have been, that Jesus was talking to a Samaritan woman. They were shocked. They were puzzled. This made no sense. And then John said that the woman, she got the hint. No one said anything, but she got the hint. And so she left the building, left the well, headed back to the village. Probably, maybe thinking they were going to judge her like everyone else. But this wasn't the end of what John thought important to record about this woman. He writes, back in the village, she told the people that she wouldn't go to the well when they were there. Come see a man who knew all about the things I did, who knows me inside and out. Do you think this could be the Messiah? Everyone knew her backstory. When she said he knew me inside and out, they would have been like, yeah, so do we. She didn't have it all together. All she did was she went back to the sphere that she knew, and she shared with them that she had had an encounter with Jesus. And because of her backstory and because of her reputation, you might just, I think, reasonably assumed that the people in the village would have just rejected her invitation to come back to the well. Not because it was noon, but because of who was making the invitation. Like, lady, you've entered Liz Taylor territory with your marital record. Why should we listen to you? For whatever reason, that's not what happened. John records they went out to see for themselves. She just shared about her encounter with Jesus. And that's something that we have the opportunity to do. But not everyone does it. Not everyone shares their story around our encounter with Jesus. And look, I kind of, just to simplify things, there's two groups of people that I understand why they might not care to share their story or might crop themselves out of sharing their story. The first group is what I call the hookers and cocaine group. You know, that's their backstory. It's pretty wild. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty spectacular. It's pretty sensational. And they don't like to share their backstory. I'm talking in general terms. Some people in that category don't like to share their backstory because of the guilt and the shame that they maybe still feel or carry around from their past. Maybe the fear of judgment that they might get talking about their past. But there's a real shame if anyone in this group crops themselves out from sharing their Jesus story, because their Jesus story is a rescue story. And if Netflix know anything, they know that people love a good rescue story. And the reason we love a good rescue story is because we know that without the rescue, this would have ended very differently. Except for the hero that entered the narrative, or heroes, and did the rescuing. And if you've been someone who's been rescued, your mess can become your message. That was this lady, the woman at the well. Her mess became her message. And John records many of the Samaritans from that village committed themselves to Jesus because of the woman's witness. He knew about all the things I did. He knows me inside and out. Then there's another, generally speaking, almost at the other end of the spectrum, group that I also see and have seen crop themselves out from sharing their Jesus story, and I call them the seemingly unspectacular group. These are the people they don't even know where to find hookers and cocaine. You know, they crop themselves out because they consider their story is probably just going to be a bit of a yawn fest. I never did cocaine. I haven't killed anybody. But let me tell you, if you're in this category, parents want to hear your story because they want to know that it's possible to not fall over the edge of the cliff. Every teacher, coach, community leader want to hear that it's possible, that yes, Jesus can rescue. Thank God for sending Jesus into people's lives to rescue them when they needed rescuing, when they had no hope, no other options. They tried to get out themselves, it didn't work. And thank God for Jesus inserting himself into people's lives so they didn't ever need to have such spectacular rescuing. You know, we have a phrase, better a fence at the top of the hill than an ambulance at the bottom. Well, the great news is that Jesus is both. He's both a fence at the top of the hill and he can be an ambulance at the bottom. Both. But if you're the person that has never fallen over the fence at the top of the hill, given the multitude of ways we can destroy our lives today, people need to hear your seemingly unspectacular story.
It was fifth grade, and me and a few of my friends, It was cool. We got invited to go to a Bible study at a different school in the mornings. We saw the impact that it was having on that school. And then honestly, like a few months in, we're sitting there, me and my friends, and we're like, hey, what if we did this at our school? We were all just like a little nervous at first, like starting something big. But we're like, all right, well, what's the first step? We're like, okay, we need a host classroom.
So about 7 years ago, I was teaching 6th grade math, and I had 6 boys in my class come up and ask if they could use my classroom for a weekly Bible study. And I would just sit at my desk, let them do their thing. And I'm listening kind of, and these boys just, to the core of themselves, every ounce of their body was their faith. And like for me, that was like, oh my gosh, these are 6th grade boys. That's not the norm. And listening to these boys just talk about it, I was like, oh my gosh, like I want that. Like, I want that in my life.
Sometimes she went out and did recess duty or whatever, so she wouldn't be in there. But then there was one morning and she actually joined in on our conversation. And I remember we had a discussion question and we all went around the table answering it. And then Miss Phillips jumped in and answered it for herself. And we're like, hey, that was really cool. And then we, had a little discussion with her.
I was lost when these boys came into my life. I was not in a good place. I was depressed. I was lonely. I was searching for these boys to just, their faith to influence and just to show me that amazingness of God. I guess I didn't even know that it was missing. And so then to see those boys, I saw what I was missing out on.
The day was so cool. I remember one moment, the 4 of us that started it, she pulled us out of our classrooms during the day and she was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that you guys have inspired me and impacted my life, that your faith that you've shown in this classroom has really moved me and influenced me. That I actually decided to go all in with Jesus and get baptized at my church. And just hearing her say those words shocked all of us. And we were like, whoa, God is so good. We would have never imagined something like that would happen. And we were all very joyful and we were just super happy for her.
Who would have thought 4 boys in a 6th grade classroom could change an adult's life? I can just imagine how lost I would have been. Now, you can feel lost for a moment, but you also know who's right next to you going through it. I still talk to some of them or even talk to their parents. And anytime they talk about them, I tell them, oh my gosh, I tell them I love them and just, they changed my life.
So looking back, I learned about the power of influence. And honestly, at the time, me and my buddy's goal, our main goal wasn't to, influence the teachers and the students. We just wanted to grow a Bible study and share the love of Jesus. But the biggest thing at that time is we just remained faithful and we were just obedient. When we felt a calling on our heart, we were ready to act. And we were just middle schoolers. We didn't have a whole lot of influence or social status. We definitely weren't perfect in any means. We'd always forget to do the laundry, do the dishes at home, right? But we were faithful and we were obedient. And seeing what God did with that is something that he can do in everyone's life, right? When you feel a calling on your heart and you're faithful and obedient and you walk in his steps, just watch and see the amazing things that God's going to do in your life, because it's extremely powerful.
So a group of 6th graders taking it on themselves to gather together to study the Bible and to see their lives impacting their sphere in unexpected ways for Jesus. They were influences. And that's become part of their story. Now, one of the things that I have found helpful is being able to tell your story in 3 minutes. If you had the opportunity to tell your story in 3 minutes, could you do it? Your Jesus story. Now, several decades ago, the emphasis was on something like this. Now, these are two very clunky graphics, and the reason they're clunky is because people don't kind of do this anymore. So, I don't know, these are back from the 80s, I don't know. But it was, this idea that humanity is on one side of the cliff, sin separates us from God, who's on the other side. And there's nothing we can do to bridge that gap. And so God sent Jesus into the world, and Jesus died on the cross for forgiveness of our sins. And he made it possible for us to be restored into a relationship with God. Now that is 100% true. It's the story. It's less than a minute. But in 2023, I just haven't found that this is the most effective way to influence people for Jesus by way of a story. Like, that's his story. Anyway. I find that the most effective way is your story. And your story is powerful for two reasons. Number one, stories are often the shortest distance between two people. And secondly, it's very difficult to doubt the veracity of your story because it's your story. Now, someone could doubt that Jesus was really behind your transformation, but they can't doubt the truth of your transformation. So if you were asked to share your Jesus story in under 3 minutes, could you do it? And I'd encourage you and give you this as homework. Give it a shot. Maybe write it down. Think it through. What's sort of the big rocks with my Jesus story? And how could I share that when the opportunity comes in under 3 minutes? My Jesus story falls largely into the seemingly unspectacular category. But I don't think that it's not powerful and not worth sharing. In fact, I think it's relatable by a large number of people. It goes something like this. That I grew up in a family. I was raised Catholic. My parents were the type of Catholics who actually went to church every week. And so my brother and I went to church every week. And so we had an awareness of God, and I had an awareness of God. But God was sort of like a distant. He was way out there. And I didn't know anything about what it meant to have a personal relationship with him. Even Jesus was like just some dead guy on a cross. I didn't kind of get it. Well, when I was 21, I kind of fell backwards into a community of young adults, 20-somethings, who, by the way, happened to all be Catholic. And they had stumbled across this idea by reading their Bible that we could and ultimately should have a relationship with Jesus, that it was both possible and vital. And I had the opportunity to take that step to ask Jesus to forgive my sins and to enter into a personal relationship with him. And I was like, well, why didn't someone tell me this earlier? But I took that next step, and then from there, I started to read my Bible. I started to, I did life with these people, exposed myself to great biblical teaching. I started praying for myself and really allowing God to start transforming me from the inside out. And whilst I didn't have any hookers and cocaine in my history, I was someone who was enveloped by anger issues, insecurity, major character flaws, some of which I was aware of and either couldn't or wouldn't do anything about, or others that I wasn't aware of, and yet they were hurting the people in my life. And over years, and now decades, of following Jesus, I have been transformed to where those things no longer control my life. Now, I'm still a work in progress. The transformation bar hasn't hit the 100% mark, but whilst I'm not the person Jesus ultimately wants me to be yet, I'm no longer the person I used to be. And I credit that to opening my heart and my life up to Jesus and going all in following him. And you could do that too. Yeah, that's my seemingly unspectacular story. How about yours? Now, final thing today is every week we upload a featured plan in the Bible app around the topic that we're teaching. So we'll be airing this on a Sunday, premiering it, and on the Monday there'll be a featured plan around what it means to be influential for Jesus in the My Church feature in the Bible app. All you need to do is get your camera open, scan this QR code, and it'll allow you to set Elevate Church as your church in the Bible app. And that's where you're going to be able to find every single week a fresh, brand new, featured Bible plan that carries on and builds on the topic that we've taught each week as a part of Elevate Church. So go all in with us. We'll be back next week. Bring somebody with you, have a watch party, sit on the couch together, whatever it takes. Let's grow and be effective in our influence for Jesus.